Hello, my name is Mark Holmes. I'm the editorial director of Via Satellite, and we're back for another of our Thursday morning conversations. And I'm delighted to have joined me today Michael Mehlberg, who is the regional sales director for WindRiver. So, firstly, Michael, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Our pleasure. How is before we talk a little bit more about technology and cybersecurity, how's life been under lockdown for you?
So not too bad. I've been working from home for a good long time. I love it. It works well with me. I've talked to folks who, find themselves at 5 p.m. in their pajamas still, and they don't like it. But for me, it works well. And there wasn't too much of a change when lockdown happened. So, the wife and kids, we have our routine, and it's worked well.
Fantastic. Well, let's talk a little bit about cybersecurity. And for those of you who know me, this is a very topic close to my heart. I'm actually the program chair for our CyberSat events, and we actually have a big CyberSat Gov event coming up in Reston in October. And I know that we've seen some big security events recently. And from your context, Michael, I mean, what have you seen in terms of important security events over the last 12 months, and what can we learn from them as an industry?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, a lot of us actually have been seeing sort of an uptick in these cyber events. It maybe started with the majority of people seeing the SolarWinds attack, and then JBS Meet and the Colonial Pipeline, which actually affected me directly. You said you're going to Reston here on the East Coast. That's right down the street from me. For the first time ever, I saw cars parked on the highway, just presumably out of gas, and huge lines because of these cyber attacks. But even before that, there were attacks. Of course, being in the cyber industry, I've kept an eye on cyber attacks. There was a Russian command and control cyber malware called DrovaRub that was released last year. Another attack called Blindside came out. So there seems to be an uptick in these cyber attacks, and they're all, I guess, approximately the same in their maliciousness, and that they're just trying to gain control of systems. They're trying to take them down. They're trying to exploit data and information, and just gain control. And depending on what the attack is going after, it can have devastating consequences, like in the Colonial Pipeline example or SolarWinds, for example.
I mean, the thing I found interesting is I felt that, particularly with Colonial Pipeline, that they were becoming almost like more mainstream now, that you didn't necessarily have to be a cyber expert or people like ourselves who are maybe more immersed in this topic on a day-to-day basis.
Right.
Your family would have heard about this and seen the impact on them of a major cybersecurity breach.
That's absolutely the case. I mean, and I even compare it to, say, some of the attacks, like the Target credit card attacks a couple of years ago, where something like 100 million credit cards were released. Well, all of us were like, oh, I don't even know if it was my credit card or not. I just got a new one in the mail, and life went on. But some of these recent ones have seemed more impactful on our daily life.
So let's talk about it in terms of the space industry. I mean, we're seeing this move to software-defined satellites. We're seeing the move to LEO, thousands, maybe tens of thousands of satellites. What does this all mean for our industry, do you think?
I mean, first, it's exciting to think about. I mean, if I think about a mesh network of satellites that can be redefined, their purpose redefined. I mean, it's extremely exciting technology-wise, but it's also a little bit scary when you think about the cyber side of things. Being able to modify a satellite to have some different type of functionality is great, but you also don't want the attacker to be able to modify it to do their bidding. So I think the more software-defined satellites we put up, the more we have to consider security, the more we have to implement, proper cybersecurity hygiene in these satellites to make sure that they're doing what they're supposed to do and nothing more. Because if we don't, then some of these attacks that are currently ground-based, right, Colonial Pipeline and all of those, are just gonna elevate, and they'll be in outer space doing whatever those satellites can do and affecting us in different ways.
And where does WindRiver fit into all of this? I mean, as we know, that the satellite ecosystem is becoming more complex. Lots of innovation, lots of investment, first and foremost, not just in the satellites, but also the ground systems, the overall networks. Where does sort of WindRiver fit into this whole ecosystem now, and how do you see the role sort of developing going forward?
Yeah, not just in one different way. I mean, WindRiver is a huge, embedded software company, and we have a long history in developing software for mission critical systems. We recently were really excited to see the Mars rover land, which had our software in it. But even with my group, we're part of the Star Lab cybersecurity and technology protection group in WindRiver, focused on protecting embedded systems against different types of attacks. So WindRiver's role, is populated along many different aspects of embedded system security, and I would consider a satellite, an embedded system that requires, high performance, real-time operation, reliability, and in the case of the software-defined satellites, it's going to be security in the future too.
Let's talk a little bit about those software-defined satellites, because I mean that's again one of the big things we're sort of seeing in our industry. Talk a little bit firstly about the drivers and the move towards these satellites and what it means, or more importantly, maybe from a security perspective going forward, because this is a fairly big change to how satellites were have been done from not so long ago.
Yeah, I mean, I think the big driver, is probably cost, right? And along with that, flexibility, which are related. If I can put one satellite up and have it do 10 different things instead of having to put 10 satellites up, then it just saves me a monumental amount of money. But with that flexibility, then there's the cybersecurity aspect as well. Being able to reprogram it means that even if we do reprogram it, we want to make sure that those new software loads, the new data loads that we put in there are authentic. They're coming from an authentic source. Everything is trusted. Otherwise, anything could run on those satellites and redirect its antennas in many different ways and send data to places we don't want it to go, or do various malicious things. So I think flexibility and cost are probably huge drivers for this. But in order to capitalize on that cost and flexibility, I think we need to have really good cyber resiliency built in. Otherwise, if a malicious actor takes over the satellite and gets it doing something that it's not supposed to do, or just destroys it in some way, or deadens it so that it doesn't work anymore, well, then you haven't really saved anything. You got to put a new satellite up, or you have to spend a lot of money trying to recapture control of the satellite and get it back under your under your purview. So those things go hand in hand. I think that cybersecurity and the flexibility both have to work together in order to make sure that we capitalize on those cost savings.
I mean, we often talk about the threat vectors, the threat landscape. Is the threat exponentially increasing, do you think, for satellite players? I mean, it'd be a fairly big badge of honor, I would imagine, to compromise a satellite or a satellite network of some kind. Do you feel like the threat is getting much closer now to our industry?
The more software we put in, the more we have the ability to redefine what the hardware and the software does, just based on software changes. All of these attacks that work today on ground-based systems, on our devices and computers and embedded systems, it's just going to be available to attackers on the satellite front. So whatever the reasons may be, whether it's national interest or just the badge of honor that you talk about, I think they will eventually be a target, unfortunately, as it is to say that, just because the tools and techniques are available and man, that thing is up there flying around, and wouldn't it be great to bring it down, is sort of the attacker's mindset.
And what would be the one or two like must-have things for securing software-defined satellites? What are the operators of these networks and these systems really need to do?
So one or two must-have things. We got to make sure that the satellite is doing what we intend it to do, even if we change the functionality in the case of software defined. So there's got to be integrity involved, right? The software packages that are installed on it when the satellite goes up, or the software packages that we send to it when we change its functionality. We have to make sure that those are the software packages that we intend to have running on it, and not somebody else's software package, and not a maliciously modified one. So just, implementing something like mandatory access control, for example, where we're creating a security policy and making sure that the software that we put on there is the software that's supposed to run, that it's only accessing the data that it's supposed to access, and things of that nature, I think is one really big thing. And then I would say two, that goes right along with that, is if we're giving ourselves the ability to update the software packages and the data that's being sent to the satellites, then we need to make sure that we have a secure communication channel between the ground station and the satellite, or even in the case of mesh satellite networks, satellite to satellite communication, because we don't want to have an attacker be able to spoof a communications channel and send whatever they want to send to it, or pretend that they're another satellite and create some inauthentic channel between the two. So I would say authenticated secure communication, using standard encryption between the ground station and the satellite, or between multiple satellites, is probably the second really important thing. And those two go hand in hand, right? Ensuring that the software that we put on there is what we expect it to be, and ensuring that the software and the data that we send to it is through a channel that nobody else can interrupt or compromise in any sort of way, are two really important things.
Now, one of the interesting things about our industry, and maybe I'm referring more to Geo Satellites, is these are satellites that sometimes take 1 or 2 years to build. They're often in orbit for 15, even 20 years. How can sort of customers with these older platforms that do not support secured updates or other security technologies achieve a more secure update process? I mean, what needs to be done there?
That's a good question. I mean, if you have, a legacy system up there that's still in operation, to the extent possible, right? If you can provide some level of update to it, right? Maybe a new software package that does the same thing but has some of these security principles built in, that could be a great first step. In the case that you can't do that, right? Maybe it's just hardware-defined satellite. Properly implemented monitoring and auditing, to what extent you can, at least gives you an alert of some sort if malicious action has taken place. Maybe you can somehow quantify what that malicious action was and decide whether you need to, stop operations or refresh or do whatever it may be. So it really depends on the hardware and the software and what capabilities you have to update it. In the case that you can't update it, maybe just implementing that monitoring to at least keep an eye on it and make sure that you have an understanding when you've been attacked, if you've been attacked, and then a policy that you can decide what you do and how you take action if that is in fact the case. But if you can't update it, maybe considering implementing some of these integrity monitoring, mandatory access control policies, things of that nature, depending on what the architecture is, to get an update there and make sure you lock it down a little bit better.
I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? When we talk about geo satellites that could be 2 decades old, we talk about these new software-defined satellites. We're talking about LEO satellites, potentially thousands of small satellites. That must present a really big challenge, in order to keep these secure, because there's so many different different forms of satellites, different sizes, different capabilities, some with software, some not with software. How do you sort of view that challenge for say, a company like WindRiver that's, immersed in the whole security aspects of keeping these networks secure?
Yeah, I mean, it's exciting to us. We do it all the time. We see multiple systems. I would consider it just to be multiple systems or programs that we would interact with. Every one that we look at, every system that we look at is a little bit different. It's different in the hardware components they choose, in the software architecture that they create, and there's security principles that you can bring to the table to apply to any architecture in order to make that architecture and that platform secure. And so, it's a little bit of a puzzle. It's a little bit of a game, and we love to attack that puzzle and solve it, because we can take these principles and these tools that we have, and we can apply it to different systems in different ways and get the same outcome, which is a cyber resilient platform that is, resistant against these different types of attacks.
If we could dig in a little bit more technically, what are the biggest challenges that sort of engineering teams face with implementing the SEC in DevOps?
Yeah, so I would say, DevOps was a great, boon to the development industry, right? Continuous integration, continuous development, really speeding up the process. DevSecOps increases that even more, but there is a challenge in that sort of everybody in the cycle, that everybody in the DevOps pipeline needs to have a security mindset, right? It's not just about getting the software out the door as quickly as possible. It's about getting it out the door as quickly as possible while maintaining the security of it. And so there's a big challenge in sort of recognizing that you have to monitor the security of the software and make sure that the software is secure at every single stage in the process. You're looking at the development of the code itself, what that code compiles and links down to, how that will be installed in the system, if you can get it installed securely, and then all the way into the life cycle itself, right? A lot of these systems now are communicating, these intelligence systems are communicating back in real time, and updates are happening, and it's sort of not only just continuous development, but this just continuous life cycle of updates and whatnot. And all of that needs to be secure in a proper DevSecOps pipeline. So it's a little bit of a mindset shift of just making sure that, okay, our source code is secure. It's being validated for security in a variety of different ways. Once we compile it and we get it on the embedded system, we're getting it on there securely. We're establishing, a root of trust in the system. And then once it's out there and running, we're booting it up securely. We're making sure that at runtime it's secure. It's that mindset shift to making sure that your software and the packages are secure all the way from source code to, out in the field and in its life cycle.
And are there tools that would make the sort of the transition to DevSecOps easier?
Yeah, absolutely. There's tools out there that can be installed at any part of the process. Tools that look at source code, tools that protect the runtime system itself. WindRiver has released WindRiver Studio, which is a DevSecOps pipeline tool that just helps you manage everything from start to finish. So there's really powerful platforms out there that can sort of take the burden of the entire DevSecOps pipeline off your shoulders and let you focus on what it is that you're trying to do, which in this case may be getting a satellite up in space. In other cases, it may be getting an embedded system working or what have you.
And what is sort of next for WindRiver in terms of, I mean, you mentioned sort of toolkits there and things that you're bringing to the industry over the next few months. What kinds of products, solutions, technologies are you going to look to expand upon or bring to market to help our industry keep secure?
Yeah, lots of different things going on. We have a history of developing, secure real-time operating systems. We're well known for VxWorks, for example. We have hypervisors that we're working on for virtualization, both from a safety critical perspective and also, from a security perspective as well. I'd say the biggest thing, though, does relate back to the product I mentioned before, WindRiver Studio, where we're integrating all of these things into a DevOps, DevSecOps pipeline, where all of these tools, the operating system you choose, whether it's VxWorks or WindRiver Linux, are integrated in this continuous integration, continuous development environment, and it's all done in a secure fashion, through a very easy to use interface. So we're pretty excited about increasing the capability of each of these individual platforms, operating systems, security products that we have, but also pulling it together into Studio and giving our development customers a really easy way to use the DevSecOps pipeline and again just accomplish what they're trying to accomplish, which is getting satellites in space or developing embedded systems and pushing them out.
So this WindRiver Studio was a really big deal for you guys, and a really important milestone. Would that be fair to say in terms of what you're bringing to the table?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's a big endeavor, but we've got a great team that's behind it, and we've got some great updates coming in the coming months.
Well, we definitely look forward to those. Now, as you know, Michael, with the Thursday morning conversations, we don't always talk just about shop and cybersecurity and technologies and satellite. We also like to have a little bit of fun. So I always like to close with sort of one or two, more fun type questions. So one of the questions we often ask people is, particularly during lockdown, whether there's a movie they've enjoyed, a drama, something to recommend for our industry that you've enjoyed watching, or something like that. So I'm going to put you on the spot and ask you, to recommend us either a movie or a TV show that you've enjoyed.
I mean, the first one that comes to mind was it Tiger King? But I'm sure everybody has said that, right? I think that was the show on Netflix that everybody hunkered down and watched when lockdown hit. It
wasn't the most mentioned one. We do get a lot of people in this industry watch science fiction. So
sure.
So we have a lot more mentioned sort of. So I think some of the science fiction movies and Star Wars obviously came up a few times, and and things like that. So you really enjoy. I didn't watch Tiger King, but obviously I read about it and I heard about it. So it sounded like it was. It sounded like an amazing premise for a TV show, first and foremost.
You wouldn't think that it would work for a TV show, but for some reason it was just fascinating. So we binged watched that one pretty hard, and had a lot of fun stories to tell after with other folks that watched it as well.
Yeah, maybe at some point I will actually watch it myself. Do you have a favorite musician, favorite band, favorite artist? Who do you like to listen to when you're before you start plotting what you're going to be doing with WindRiver Studio and things like that?
Oh gosh, it changes all the time. Lately I've been listening to Hozier and Chris Stapleton. But just depending on my mood, I'll throw on Spotify and just get a playlist going with random music. So I would say I've been listening to a lot of Chris Stapleton lately for whatever reason. Yeah, just good music.
No, fantastic. Well, I think we're going to leave it there, Michael. It's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you today. Just as we have a big CyberSat show coming up in October, and we know how important this is, and we also know how important the work is that WindRiver does as well. A healthy, secure satellite industry is good for all of us. So I'd like to sort of commend you and your team and all the great work that you're doing, putting out great technology, putting out great solutions like WindRiver Studio. So, you know, it really makes a huge difference to our industry. So I wish you all the best in your team over the next few months. We look forward to talking to you again about some of the updates and some of the solutions that you're bringing, because these are fantastic solutions for our industry. So it's been a real honor and a pleasure to talk to you today.
Same to you. Thanks, Mark. Really appreciate it.